Okay. So we're going to talk about shaving bark. The outside surface is fairly rough, and also in places it's too thick. Sometimes it's not, but that's way too thick.
Okay.
Way too thick. It'd be very difficult to weave with that. This is closer to what we're after. This thickness here.
Right on, like in this part or over here? Like this spot?
This spot.
This spot here.
Yeah, that's closer to what we're after.
There we go.
About 1/10 of an inch.
Okay.
So you can take a dial caliper and measure.
Get a feel
to
for
get
it.
a feel for it. I don't measure anymore. I just do it. You're going to get a lot of variation in thickness. It's a hand processed product. Some of it may already be that thin or thinner, but I still take, even if it's that thin or thinner, I still take a very light cut off the top because it improves the surface quality tremendously. I mean, it makes this bark, which would be average looking bark in a chair, into really beautiful.
It kind of like burnishes the surface a bit, and
it creates like a it'd be the equivalent of an edge finished surface, like in a chair. You know, it gives you a really good shine to the surface. It really makes an enormous difference.
And when you say the top of the bark in relation to the tree, this the outside of the tree or the inside?
With this part, so the bark has a convex shape on the top and a concave shape on the bottom. So this part here was closer
To the inside.
to the wood.
Yeah,
Wood,
okay.
and then this was on the outside of that.
And that convex is the side that we're going to put out on the chair,
Yeah,
so it's
yes.
this nice, pleasing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I do for processing this is I soak the bark the night before for a couple of hours, or you could do it in the morning if you're going to shave or weave in the afternoon.
So it's important to give it time to not
I'll
be
get into
submerged.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we used to soak it in hot water for a half an hour and then use it.
Mm-hmm.
Two problems with that for me is one, I'm sometimes, this side chair is going to use about 120 linear feet of bark. I'm sometimes prepping bark for 3 rockers. They'll fill this entire thing with bark. I can't generate that much hot water.
So that brings up another question. How much bark per chair?
It's sold by the linear foot. It's roughly 3/4 to 7/8 inch wide. It's inconsistent from this source, but we can make it more consistent as we work on it. It's inconsistent in width and thickness. What we're dealing with now when we're shaving it is getting the thickness more consistent, but in weaving it you can also make the width more consistent. So for this bark, this is an average. Sometimes you'll find 1-inch bark. You'll need less linear feet of that probably.
Okay.
But I find in most cases 1-inch bark to be too wide visually.
Doesn't look right on
I think it's
frame.
too wide.
Okay.
I think it's too big.
The scale is off.
The scale is off.
Okay.
Particularly on a small chair like this.
Okay.
So I would say 3/4 to 7/8 is fine. May not seem like a big difference, but it is. And
You look at enough chairs and you can tell, right?
Yeah.
It just
so at this width, I allow 120 linear feet for a side chair, for a box side chair, which is a bigger seat than, let's say, a Jenny Alexander side chair.
Okay.
180 feet for a Boggs armchair, and 220 feet for a Boggs rocker.
Okay. Bar stool is
A bar stool would be same
like
as
a side chair.
Side chair.
Okay.
Same size seat exactly. That there's always some waste. There's always parts in here that you have to cut out. That allows for the waste.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we've soaked it overnight. we soaked it the night before for a couple of hours.
Regular, just tap temperature.
Yes.
Right.
So that would solve one of my problems of generating like boiling water. And then the other issue there are two issues with having the bark really wet. So the prep is the same for weaving or shaving, same prep. And so I often have to shave ahead of time. So if you shave the bark ahead of time, you dry it when you're done, and then you re-soak it. You can shave and weave on the same day, which is what we're doing.
Okay.
But often that's not the case. So as long as you do need to dry it in between, if you're not going to use it right away.
Okay.
Just hang it up, let it dry, and you're ready to use it.
In a bundle like that is fine, or a coil.
Yeah, I just put some rubber bands on there. Just wrap it up just like this and put a rubber band on. Not too tight in the middle.
Okay, let it have some breathing room.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just take a wild guess and say if you leave it wet, it's gonna be mildewy and disgusting and start rotting.
All kinds of stuff
Yeah,
like that.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So particularly in the summer, I'm really careful because it'll get mildewy and sticky and gummy like overnight.
Yeah.
If you in the summer when I soak it and I bring it inside, I put a fan on it to keep it cool.
Okay.
Even just overnight.
That's sitting in the tub?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without water. So you soak it for 2 hours.
Drain it out.
Drain it, cover it, and keep it someplace cool. In the winter, it doesn't matter. In the summer, I put a fan on it just as insurance.
Okay.
2 hours. And the next day, it's damp but not soaking wet. So that has a couple of advantages. One is when shaving it, if it was soaking wet, it's really hard to get the split blade to engage in the cut.
Just mushes.
It just slides across the surface.
Okay.
So that's one benefit. And then for weaving, the bark expands and contracts the same way wood does. So it doesn't really move this way along the length, but it does expand and contract quite a lot across its width. So if you're using bark that's wet, weaving with bark that's wet, and when we weave, we pack the weave as tight together as we can. But if that bark is wet, when you do that,
like really wet,
not just surface wet. So we're going to spray it to keep it wet while we're weaving, but I'm talking about interior. If you soak it, it's going to get wet through and through. If you leave it that way and weave with it, it's going to shrink quite a lot, and you have large gaps between the weave. So we want to minimize that. You can't eliminate it. So by drying it overnight, essentially, to a state where it's damp but not wet, that minimizes the shrinkage side to side and gives you a better looking finished product in the end.
So it's like a Goldilocks situation. You want it to be pliable enough to work, but not so wet that it's too fat.
And we do spray it as we're working on it, but that's mainly just on the surface. It doesn't really soak in.
Okay.
So you can think of this as working green wood. That's the equivalent. You wouldn't work, or I wouldn't work sopping wet green. I'd want it to be a little bit dry, but not so dry that it's hard to work. So there's a balance there. So this is like working green wood.
Okay.
Is the best equivalent I can think of. So I've got a few more bundles in here, and then keep this covered.
Okay.
I made this contraction for the shave horse. It's got a slight curve to this surface that mimics the curve. This is a convex curve, and the concave curve on the bark sits on top of that.
Makes to it. Okay.
And mimics that. When you put it in, just like that, and then you want to unroll it. If you don't, it's going to get twisted as you go.
Okay.
It doesn't. I usually try to lay it out across the shop floor. It doesn't really have to be that. But you do want to unroll, otherwise it's gonna get twisted, and you're gonna spend a lot of time leaning over the back of the horse doing this, untwisting. Okay. So I use a curved bottom spoke shave.
All right.
And I find that's better than a flat bottom for getting the cut started. And you want the blade really sharp. So I put in, both our spoke shaves have brand new not brand new blades, but
Freshly sharpened.
freshly sharpened blades. And more than likely, well, we're not doing that much, but if I were doing 120 feet all with one spoke shave, I'd probably have to resharpen somewhere in between there.
Okay.
You'll know when it's time, because it's going to start getting gunked up really fast, and when it starts doing
So
that,
it turns into a scraper instead of a cutter.
I don't know.
Maybe.
It gets very frustrating. So you'll know when it's time to resharpen.
Sharp fixes everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're just gonna,
Come up a
not
little
super
closer
thick here, but it is a little heavy. And this is, so set your spoke shave, and I'm getting nice shavings, a little light.
Let me see this. So.
So that's okay, but that's still a little heavy in there. I do this the same way I do everything else. I shave down the edges, and then I go in between.
Okay.
So that's good.
And then you can kind of feel across the width to
Then I
know that it's
usually,
consistent.
I always, the bark always has a number on it, which is how long it is, so I'll rewrite that
Okay.
on the end. And then I just keep going.
All right.
And I don't measure the thickness, I just look at it and feel it. And when I get down to a thickness that I think is right, I'll just move on. We do have some really thick sections in here. I've found a workaround to those. Sometimes those just take forever to shave. Starts getting more thick than that. We'll see if I come up against something.
I think you will right here. It's almost a 1/4 inch thick.
Yeah. So when we get to that, I'll show you what I discovered recently as a good fix to that. I used to even use a draw knife.
Yeah.
On really thick sections, but that's very risky.
You'll be tying a lot of knots in your bark as you're weaving the chair, right?
So once you get good at this, it goes pretty fast. It's a very pleasant thing to do. Turn on some music if you like.
A little therapeutic shop session.
Some people really complain about doing this, but I like it. People complain about the bark, weaving the bark seats.
I think it's kind of like putting finish
every
on.
aspect of it, but I like every aspect
Well,
of
you're
it.
a weaver. That's your thing. Like, you're the one person who studied weaving and actually used it to weave.
Yeah, so
Made a job out of it.
So people complain about it, but I have no complaints. I like it. I love the result. I love seeing that pattern emerge as we start weaving the weft through side to side. It's just it's such a beautiful seat. It's absolutely worth the effort. So here's a pretty thick section. So what I do if I get a really thick section is I'll turn it over.
Okay.
And you can see that it's really mostly thick right on the edges. So I've found that if I knock those off, I then end up with a much easier shaving. If it gets gunked up, you can just do that. So it's going to be more stringy on the inside, which
Okay.
is why I'm having a little issues with the shave. But if I do that, it's gonna remove material faster. It's removing the stuff that is causing the problem, which is just the outside edges. So I'll do this for however long this bark is very thick. So maybe till about here. Now I'm going backwards. Flip it around back to where I started. It may seem like a lot of extra work, but it's not. It's more work trying to get it thin enough off of one side. So now I'm
It's
back.
almost
I'm
there.
almost there. So
Yeah.
this will make this part much easier. And it's going to shave better because this is a much smoother surface, not as stringy.
And you're staying closer to the face that you really want to show for the finished product anyways, right?
Yeah, and if you run into areas like this, just do the best you can.
Uh-huh.
I do not cut out, at this point, I don't cut out defects.
Okay,
If this lands on the bottom of the chair, it'll be okay. So we deal with defects like this. If this was on top of the chair, I'd probably cut it out. But on the bottom of the chair, I would leave it. So we need to make those decisions. See how fast this is going now? That would have taken me a long time just from the top. But what it does is it makes this surface flat as well as this surface. Much easier than using the claw knife.
Yeah. Less stress.
And you get lots of steps on your Apple Watch. So we're almost finished with this 15-foot long piece, which is fairly short compared to most of the other
Yeah.
lengths in here. Now there are ways of processing the bark if you're going to harvest yourself where you won't have to do this
Okay.
at all. But I've never done them. I've never harvested bark. So
you over here.
but Peter Folensby and Brendan, is that his name?
Brennan.
Harvested some bark, and what they do is you harvest the bark and then you peel it in half, and the outer section you throw away, but the section that's closer to the wood, you're peeling. Essentially, you're peeling off the section that I'm shaving off.
You're shaving.
And then you end up with a beautiful smooth surface.
And it's already smooth. You don't really have to treat
you don't
it
have to
anymore.
do it. That's.
But you have to do that when you harvest it. You can't wait.
I don't think that people that are doing that process by hand ever have enough thickness in bark to be able to get two usable pieces, but they do get a beautiful surface on one without doing all of this.
Okay.
And I think you might be able to do this like to this bark, but I've tried it and I have not been successful. So
It's harder than this.
this doesn't bother me, so I just keep doing it this way.
Probably.
So if this bark wasn't so thick, I would have done with this strip long ago.
Okay.
It's just that there are some really thick sections and they just take longer. I'd rather them be thick than too thin though.
Yeah.
Not much I can do about thin.
And I noticed that, what you're taking off is darker. Is that really more oxidation than difference in the surface layer, or?
I think it's more just the surface layer.
So it actually.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, when it comes to you, if it was fresh off the tree, would it be lighter than it is now?
I've never
You
known.
don't get it that soon. Okay.
It always he has to dry it before it ships.
Yeah.
So that's it.
All right.
Hold the back up. If you're gonna, if you're not gonna weave, then hang it up to dry.
Okay.
If you're gonna weave, put it back in the bucket, in the container, covered container.
Does it need to be like dipped in water again, or just put it back in the?
I may spray it, but we'll see what it feels like when we start weaving.
Okay.
If it gets too dry, it's still damp. You know, I mean, it's cold when you touch it. It's still really damp. So, and rubber band.
Okay.
Back in the container.
Nice and loose. All right, so it's my turn to start shaping, right?
Well, we're both going to do it.
All right.